You won't believe what happened when HOA Karen tried to paint over my grandmother's mural. She called it graffiti, but that mural was a piece of our family's history, painted decades ago to honor the woman who built this town's heart. When she showed up with beige paint and 2 workers to destroy it, I didn't just stop her. I turned that mural into a protected landmark that the whole country now celebrates. Stick around, because you're about to see how one act of defiance turned into a movement. Speech balloon. Subscribe if you believe stories and art deserve to be protected, not erased. The first sound that pulled me out of sleep wasn't my alarm, it was scraping. Slow, deliberate, metallic scraping. At first, I thought it was just the garbage truck making its early rounds, but something about the rhythm was off. Too close. Too sharp. I rolled over and blinked at the sunlight creeping through the blinds. Saturday. My one day to sleep in. But that noise wouldn't stop. Scrape, scrape, scrape. My dog Luna was already at the window, tail stiff, ears perked. She gave a low growl, the kind that said, "Something's not right, Mom." Still half asleep, I threw on my hoodie and padded across the room. I pulled the curtain back, and my heart dropped straight to my stomach. There she was. Karen. The HOA president. The self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. And she wasn't alone. 2 men in paint-splattered overalls stood beside her, holding rollers dripping with thick, beige paint, the ugliest shade you can imagine. My garage wall, my mural, was already half covered in wide, clumsy strokes of dull brown. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe they were painting something else. But then I saw it clearly, my grandmother's face, the gentle lines I had painted around her smile, being swallowed up by beige sludge. It felt like someone was erasing her from existence. I stumbled out the front door, voice cracking as I yelled, "HEY! What are you doing? Stop!" Karen turned around slowly, as if she'd been waiting for this confrontation all along. Her short, tight curls bounced as she crossed her arms. "Good morning, Emily," she said in that syrupy tone that always hid something sharp. "We're just taking care of an HOA violation. Nothing personal." Violation. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "That's my mural, my grandmother's mural." "You can't just graffiti," she interrupted, cutting me off mid-sentence. "The HOA doesn't allow unauthorized art installations on community-facing structures. It's clearly stated in the bylaws." I glanced at the 2 painters, who looked uncomfortable but kept working anyway. Beige paint kept slapping onto the wall. Each stroke made me wince. "That's not graffiti," I said through gritted teeth. "That's my grandmother. She was a teacher here for 30 years. Everyone in this neighborhood knew her." Karen's lips curved into a smug little smirk. "Well, I'm sure she was lovely, but that doesn't change the rules. Exterior surfaces must remain neutral-colored and HOA approved." I took a step closer. "This is private property. You can't just come onto my driveway and start painting over something that doesn't belong to you." Karen didn't even flinch. "Technically, your garage wall faces the public road, so it's considered visible common frontage. The HOA board voted last week to restore uniformity to the neighborhood aesthetic." Uniformity? I snapped. "You mean boring beige conformity?" She tilted her head, clearly enjoying herself. "Rules are rules, Emily. You should have submitted a request for artistic approval before painting. You knew this would happen." I could feel tears burning in the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from rage. My voice trembled as I said, "That mural isn't just paint. It's her memory. It's all I have left of her." For a moment, something flickered in Karen's eyes, maybe guilt, maybe hesitation, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She gestured to the painters. "Well, we can't make exceptions. Please step aside. You're interfering with HOA maintenance work." That did it. I stepped right between the wall and the painters, arms spread wide. "You're not touching it. Not another stroke." The men looked at Karen uncertainly. She huffed. "Fine. Have it your way, but you'll be hearing from us. You're already in violation, and we'll be issuing a fine before the day's over." "Good," I said, voice low and shaking. "Then I'll be seeing you in court." Her smirk faltered just slightly, but she recovered. "You'll regret that attitude, young lady. The HOA doesn't lose cases." "Oh, we'll see," I said, staring her down. Karen turned on her heel and marched off, her little beige army following behind. The moment she was gone, I dropped to my knees in front of the wall. Half of my grandmother's face, her smile, the bright sunflowers surrounding her, was gone, buried under lifeless paint. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch the edge of what was left, the corner of her eye, still visible beneath a streak of beige. My voice broke as I whispered, "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I'll fix this. I promise." The morning breeze carried the smell of paint and dust, and for a moment, everything felt hollow, the laughter of kids in the distance, the quiet hum of sprinklers, the chirping birds that didn't seem to care what had just happened. But deep down, something else began to stir. Not sadness. Not helplessness. Determination. They thought they could erase her, that they could bully me into compliance like everyone else in this neighborhood. But not this time. Not when it came to her. I stood up slowly, taking one last look at the half-destroyed mural. "This isn't over," I whispered. "Not by a long shot." And as I turned back toward the house, I noticed something taped to my mailbox, a letter, stamped with the HOA logo. Notice of violation, unauthorized artwork. Fine, $1,200. I laughed bitterly. Karen worked fast. But she didn't realize I could work faster. After Karen's paint raid, my house felt hollow. Every time I looked out the window and saw that beige smear covering half my mural, it felt like someone had taken an eraser to my heart. I couldn't even step outside without feeling angry all over again. The wall that once made neighbors stop and smile now looked wounded, half beauty, half bureaucracy. That mural wasn't just paint on a wall. It was a story, our story. My grandmother, Lily Thompson, wasn't just any woman. She was the kind of person who lit up a room with a smile, even when life threw everything at her. She was a teacher, an artist, a fighter. The kind of woman who made people believe they could be better just by being around her. When I was a kid, I used to sit in her little studio for hours while she painted. The walls smelled like coffee and oil paints, and old records played in the background. She always said, "Emily, color tells the truth, people are too afraid to speak." At the time, I didn't fully understand. But as I got older, those words sank in. When she passed away 2 years ago, the world lost a little bit of color, and I swore I'd bring some of it back. That's why I painted her mural. Not for attention. Not to stand out. But because I wanted her memory to live in something beautiful. She spent her life teaching this community's children, including, ironically, Karen's daughter. Yet somehow, the HOA decided her face wasn't uniform enough for their beige paradise. The morning after the incident, I sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and my sketchbook open, trying to plan how to restore the mural. But the problem wasn't just paint anymore, it was power. The HOA wasn't just about lawns and mailboxes. It was control disguised as community. And Karen? She was the queen bee of control. I opened my laptop and started digging through HOA bylaws. If they wanted to play rulebook games, I'd play smarter. It turns out, Section 8.4 of the HOA covenant had an interesting clause. Any art representing historical or cultural significance to the community could be submitted for special review and heritage exemption. Bingo! Grandma wasn't just my memory, she was part of the town's history. She'd been honored twice by the mayor for her decades of teaching, and even had a scholarship fund named after her at the local high school. If I could prove that, then my mural wouldn't just be art. It would be heritage. And that, my friends, was something even Karen couldn't paint over. I called my old art mentor, Mr. Reynolds, the one who taught me everything after Grandma passed. He picked up on the second ring. "Emily. Been a while. How's your grandmother's mural coming along?" I hesitated. It was fine, until the HOA decided to fix it. "Oh no," he groaned. "Let me guess, they called it graffiti?" I laughed bitterly. "Word for word." He sighed. "I've seen this before. They always want conformity, never creativity. But you've got something powerful here. If it's tied to local history, you can register it for preservation, city level, even." I blinked. "Wait, you mean I can make it legally protected?" "Absolutely. I'll send you the forms. You'll need proof of her historical contribution, letters, photos, press clippings. Then submit to the city's Cultural Heritage Commission. Once approved, Your HOA won't be able to touch it without federal permission." It felt like a lifeline had just dropped from the sky. I thanked him and hung up, adrenaline already rushing through me. I spent the next few hours going through boxes in the attic, old newspaper articles, school photos, certificates, and Grandma's old journal. Inside that journal was a sketch of her very first classroom, the same sunflowers I had painted on the mural. She'd drawn them because they reminded her of her students. "Faces always turned toward the light," she wrote. I smiled through tears. She would have laughed at the idea of Karen trying to erase her. "They'll learn," she'd probably say. "You can't paint over the sun, dear." By noon, I had a full binder of evidence, every document I needed to prove Grandma's legacy. But I wasn't just going to submit this quietly. No, I wanted Karen to see what happens when you try to erase art born from love. So I printed one of the articles that featured Grandma, beloved teacher of Maple Creek inspires generations, and taped it right onto the beige paint where her face used to be. Beneath it, I wrote in big black letters, "This is history. You just tried to erase it." That evening, when Karen walked her dog past my house, because of course she did, she froze. She stood there for a long moment, just staring at the wall, the article fluttering in the breeze. Then she stormed off without a word. A few neighbors saw it too, Mr. and Mrs. Patel from next door, and even the Parkers across the street. Later, they came over with coffee and sympathy. "That mural's beautiful," Mrs. Patel said softly. "Your grandmother taught our kids. She deserves to be remembered." "I'm not letting them take it," I promised. And that's when something shifted. I realized I wasn't alone anymore. What started as my personal tribute was now becoming a community movement. Neighbors started dropping off their own stories about Grandma, essays she graded, photos from her class trips, thank you notes she'd written to parents. It wasn't just a mural anymore. It was proof that she mattered, and that the HOA didn't own everything beautiful in this town. By nightfall, my porch was covered in notes, flowers, and memories. The beige wall no longer looked like a wound, it looked like a message. And I knew then. This fight wasn't just about a painting. It was about who gets to decide what belongs in our community. Karen might have the HOA behind her. But I had the truth, and a town full of people who loved my grandmother. And I was just getting started. By the next morning, I could already feel the shift in the neighborhood's energy. What used to be quiet nods and half-hearted good mornings had turned into whispers, side glances, and pointed stares, not at me but at Karen. Word spreads fast in an HOA, and apparently, so does guilt. My mural wasn't just the talk of the block anymore, it was the story. Still, I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to back down, not when she felt her authority slipping. Sure enough, by noon I got an email. The subject line made my stomach drop, "Mandatory compliance notice, final warning." When I opened it, I almost laughed from disbelief. It read like a legal document, full of capital letters and threats about daily accruing fines if I didn't restore the property to its original uniform appearance. The funniest part? It was signed by Karen J. Matthews, HOA president, like she was some kind of judge or sheriff. But it wasn't funny for long. Because attached to that email was a photo, my mural, the one she had vandalized, with a giant red X drawn across it and the words "removal order" stamped underneath. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about rules anymore. Karen was angry. Angry that people supported me. Angry that her control was slipping. Angry that someone dared to defy her. Fine. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, by the book. That afternoon, I drove downtown to the Maple Creek City Hall, clutching my binder full of proof. I filed my petition with the Cultural Heritage Commission, the one Mr. Reynolds told me about. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, looked over the documents and smiled. "Oh, Lily Thompson. I remember her," she said. "She taught my son back in the day. Wonderful woman. You're her granddaughter?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well," she said, stamping the first page. Thud. "Then we'll make sure this gets reviewed quickly." I thanked her and walked out feeling like I'd just taken my first real step toward justice. But back home, Karen had already escalated. There were fresh HOA flyers on every porch, bold red letters screaming "Community Alert, Unapproved Structure and Property Violation." And underneath, a picture of my mural. She'd labeled it graffiti and claimed it lowered property values. My name and address were printed right below. It wasn't just a smear campaign. It was public humiliation. Neighbors who'd supported me the night before looked nervous now. Some avoided eye contact. A few even removed their flowers and notes, afraid of retaliation. I could almost hear Karen laughing in her living room, thinking she'd scared everyone back into silence. But not me. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote a post for the town's community Facebook group, the same one Karen used to post HOA reminders and scold people for leaving trash cans out too long. My post started with a single line: "The HOA tried to erase my grandmother's face. Let me tell you why this matters." I included photos, before and after the paint, scans of Grandma's awards, newspaper clippings about her decades of service, and finally, a clip from my security camera showing Karen and her painters covering it up. Within an hour, the post exploded. Comments flooded in from people I'd never met. "She taught my brother, she changed his life. I can't believe the HOA did this. That mural is part of our town's soul. Karen's gone too far this time." By morning, over 3,000 people had shared it. Even the local paper reached out asking for an interview. And guess who showed up at my door just as I was finishing my makeup for the camera crew? Karen. She looked furious, the kind of furious that comes when someone's control slips through their manicured fingers. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed, standing on my porch like a villain out of a soap opera. "You've turned this neighborhood into a circus." I crossed my arms. "No, Karen. You did that when you painted over my grandmother's face." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're violating HOA rules, and this publicity stunt, will cost you dearly. We have lawyers, Emily." I smiled coldly. "So do I. And by the way, my mural's now under review for historical protection. You might want to start painting over your own name on those flyers." For the first time since I'd moved into this community, Karen had no comeback. She just stood there, red-faced and speechless. Then she stormed off, muttering something about ungrateful residents. But that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The next day, a letter arrived from the HOA attorney, full of legal jargon accusing me of defamation and unauthorized construction. I took it straight to my lawyer, who laughed when he finished reading it. "They don't have a case," he said. "You have proof she damaged your property. In fact, you could file a countersuit for vandalism and emotional distress." I blinked. "Wait, you mean I could sue them?" "Exactly. And judging by this evidence, you'd win." It was like a light switched on inside me. For weeks, I'd been reacting, defending, explaining, proving. But now I had the power to fight back. So I did. I filed a formal complaint with the city against the HOA for property damage and harassment. And while I waited for the Cultural Heritage Commission to review my mural, I let the story grow. Reporters kept calling. Neighbors started putting small sunflowers in their windows in support. Even the mayor's office released a statement saying they were looking into the situation. Meanwhile, Karen tried to hold an emergency HOA meeting to silence me, but barely 10 people showed up. Most of the neighborhood had already seen the truth. When I saw her standing there, trying to hold her little power rally in an empty clubhouse, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because for the first time, Karen realized what it felt like to lose control. And I wasn't done yet. Not until my grandmother's mural was fully restored, and Karen's so-called authority was exposed for what it really was: bullying in a beige suit. The morning of the hearing felt like stepping into a storm I'd been preparing for my whole life. The Cultural Heritage Commission had scheduled an official review to determine if my grandmother's mural could be declared a protected landmark, which would make it illegal for the HOA to ever touch it again. I barely slept the night before. My dining table was covered in binders, photos, signed letters, and statements from former students who loved my grandma. Even the mayor's office had sent a note of support. Still, my hands shook as I loaded everything into my car. When I arrived at City Hall, cameras were already waiting. Reporters, bloggers, and even a few locals who'd followed the story online had gathered outside. One woman held a sign that said, "Art isn't a crime." Another said, "Let Grandma Lily stay." Karen showed up 20 minutes late, wearing a cream-colored suit and sunglasses, trying to look unbothered, but the red blotches on her neck told another story. She strutted past the cameras like she owned the place, muttering, "This is ridiculous," to anyone who'd listen. Inside the council chamber, it was standing room only. Every seat was filled with neighbors, teachers, artists, and curious residents. The air buzzed with anticipation. On one side sat me and my attorney. On the other, Karen and the HOA's lawyer, a stiff man in a pinstriped suit who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. The chairwoman of the commission banged her gavel. Let's begin. Case number 24 to 1987, application for cultural landmark status, submitted by Ms. Emily Thompson regarding the mural at 112 Willow Creek Lane. My lawyer nodded for me to start. I stood, heart hammering, and approached the microphone. This mural isn't just paint on a wall, I began, my voice steady but emotional. It's a portrait of my grandmother, Lily Thompson, a teacher who devoted 40 years to this community. She taught hundreds of kids, many of whom are now adults raising families here. She believed in art as a way to heal and connect people. This mural was my tribute to her, and a part of our town's history. I turned to the screen behind me where I'd set up slides, photos of Grandma with her students, letters of thanks, and finally, a picture of the mural, bright and alive before Karen's paintbrushes turned it dull. The audience murmured softly. A few people even wiped their eyes. Then I played the security footage, the clip that changed everything. On the big screen, Karen appeared, standing proudly with two painters as she ordered them to paint over the mural. The timestamp was clear. The voices were clear. There was no denying what she'd done. Karen's lawyer immediately jumped up. Objection. That footage was obtained without consent. The chairwoman cut him off. The footage shows an act of property damage. The objection is overruled. Karen's face turned crimson. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously, but he only sank lower into his chair. I continued. They called it graffiti. But this isn't vandalism, it's heritage. This mural doesn't lower property values. It raises community pride. And what happened here isn't about aesthetics. It's about respect. Respect for history, for family, and for the people who built this town. When I finished, the room erupted into quiet applause. Even the council members nodded approvingly. Then it was Karen's turn. She stood stiffly, gripping her papers like a lifeline. Her voice came out sharp and defensive. This isn't personal, she said. We have community rules for a reason. Our HOA maintains a uniform aesthetic. That mural doesn't fit our standards and could discourage potential buyers. Someone in the back yelled, "You painted over a teacher's face, Karen," and laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's cheeks flushed. We were just enforcing policy," she snapped. The homeowner was warned multiple times. The chairwoman raised an eyebrow. According to city records, Ms. Thompson's property is outside your HOA jurisdiction. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen blinked, caught completely off guard. That can't be right. The HOA boundary extends, not according to the official zoning maps, the chairwoman interrupted. Your HOA has no authority over her property whatsoever. You could practically hear the collective gasp from the audience. Karen's lawyer leaned forward, whispering harshly to her, but she was frozen, mouth open, eyes darting. Her whole power act crumbled right there under the fluorescent lights of City Hall. My lawyer smirked and handed the commission a copy of the same zoning map, highlighted neatly in yellow. Just to confirm, he said smoothly, the HOA illegally damaged Ms. Thompson's private property. The chairwoman nodded. That appears to be the case. I almost couldn't breathe. The truth, the thing I'd been fighting to prove, was finally out in the open. After a few more testimonies from supportive neighbors and a brief recess, the commission returned with their decision. All in favor of designating the Thompson mural as a protected cultural landmark, please say aye. Aye, said every member in unison. The gavel came down with a satisfying crack. It's official, the chairwoman said. The mural at 112 Willow Creek Lane is now a protected cultural landmark under the city of Maple Creek. The crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters surged forward, microphones flashing. Karen slumped into her chair, defeated, as her lawyer packed up silently. She looked up at me once, her expression hollow, before storming out, clutching her purse like it was the last piece of control she had left. I stood there shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. Pride. Victory. Grandma's mural was safe. The HOA was exposed. And Karen? She'd just destroyed her own reputation in front of the entire town. As I stepped outside into the sunlight, a local reporter approached with a grin. "Emily, how does it feel to make history today?" I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "It feels like Grandma's still watching over me," I said. "And she's smiling too." The days after the hearing felt like living in a dream. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without dread pressing down on my chest. The morning sun spilled across my kitchen table, landing right on the framed photo of Grandma Lily. I smiled, whispering, "We did it, Grandma." By noon, news of the decision had spread across the entire county. Local TV stations ran headlines like, "Teacher's Mural Saved, HOA Overreach Exposed." "Small-town artist wins big against HOA Tyranny." My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, friends, former students of Grandma's, even total strangers sending words of support. One text stood out: "You didn't just save a mural. You reminded us that people matter more than rules." I must have read that a dozen times. Later that day, I went outside to check on the mural. The section Karen's painters had ruined was still smeared with that awful beige, but now, it didn't look like defeat anymore. It looked like proof of what we'd fought through and what we'd won. Then I noticed something new. Someone had left flowers, bright marigolds, and a handwritten note taped to the wall. It read, "For Grandma Lily. The whole town remembers her." I wasn't the only one crying that day. But while the community was celebrating, Karen was imploding. The HOA members were furious. At an emergency meeting, several residents demanded her resignation. "She acted outside HOA jurisdiction," one man shouted. "She embarrassed all of us," another said. Karen tried to defend herself, her voice brittle. "I was enforcing community standards by destroying private property," someone interrupted. Even her closest allies, like the treasurer, wouldn't make eye contact. The HOA board voted, unanimously, to remove her as president. For the first time, Karen didn't argue. She just sat there, pale and quiet, staring at the table. When the vote ended, she stood up, gathered her binder, and walked out without another word. Meanwhile, life around the mural blossomed again, literally and figuratively. Within a week, artists from neighboring towns volunteered to help restore Grandma's mural to its full glory. We set up scaffolding, brushes, and paint palettes, turning my front yard into an open-air studio. Kids on bikes stopped by every afternoon to watch us work. One little girl named Mia asked shyly, "Can I help?" I handed her a small brush and pointed to a flower petal. "Sure," I said. "Grandma Lily would have loved that." She smiled so wide it almost made me tear up again. As we painted, people brought food, water, and music. Someone set up speakers playing soft jazz, Grandma's favorite. For once, my house wasn't a battleground. It was alive again. A few days later, a reporter came by for a follow-up interview. "You've become something of a local hero," she said, smiling. "How does it feel?" I laughed. "Hero? No. Just stubborn, maybe. But I think we all got tired of being pushed around by rules that forgot why they existed in the first place." The story went viral that night. By the next morning, it was trending online. People across the country were sharing the headline, "HOA tries to paint over local artist's mural, ends up creating a landmark instead." Hundreds of comments flooded in, "That woman is a legend. Art wins over bureaucracy every time. Give Grandma Lily a day named after her." Honestly, it felt surreal, but it also felt right. The city council decided to host an unveiling ceremony once the mural was fully restored. They even invited me to speak. When the day came, the whole town showed up. There were kids holding balloons, seniors in lawn chairs, and even some of Grandma's old students holding framed photos from her classroom. The mayor took the microphone first. "This mural represents not just art," he said, "but courage, the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular." Then he turned to me. "Emily, would you do us the honor?" My heart pounded as I stepped up. I glanced at the freshly restored mural, Grandma's kind eyes, her soft smile, the golden background that shimmered under the sun. "This mural isn't about me," I said. "It's about a woman who believed in kindness, in teaching, and in leaving things better than you found them. And it's about a community that remembered how to stand together when someone tried to take that away." The crowd clapped, some even cheered. A gentle breeze swept through, making the mural almost glow. For a moment, it felt like Grandma was right there beside me. Later, as people dispersed, I noticed Karen at the edge of the crowd. She wasn't dressed like the power-hungry HOA queen anymore. Just jeans, a plain shirt, and sunglasses. She didn't come closer, just stood there, watching the mural quietly. I walked toward her, unsure what I'd even say. When she saw me, she sighed. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said softly. I crossed my arms. "You didn't think painting over someone's memories would matter?" She looked down. I thought. I was doing my job. Keeping things uniform. That's what they told us to do. For once, I saw something almost human in her, not arrogance, just exhaustion. "Uniform isn't always right," I said. "Sometimes, what makes a place special is the thing that stands out." Karen nodded slightly, then walked away without another word. That was the last time I ever saw her at an HOA meeting. Weeks passed, and life finally returned to normal, but a better kind of normal. The mural was now protected by law. Tourists occasionally stopped by to take pictures. Local schools used it as an example in art history classes. And me? I finally opened my own small art studio downtown, Lily's Legacy. Every time I pass the mural, I smile. Because I know what it took to keep it standing. And I know Grandma's spirit, kind, brave, and quietly defiant, is still there, watching over the neighborhood. It started with a single video. Someone at the unveiling had recorded my short speech, the part where I said, "Uniform isn't always right. Sometimes what makes a place special is the thing that stands out." They uploaded it to social media, and within hours, it spread like wildfire. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop again. The clip had been shared by news outlets, art pages, and even a few celebrities. One caption read, "Teacher's granddaughter defends mural from HOA tyranny, and wins." The video had over 3 million views in 24 hours. I didn't know it then, but something much bigger had begun. Emails poured into my inbox, hundreds of them. People from all over the country told me their own horror stories, HOAs that fined them for planting wildflowers, painting their doors the wrong shade of blue, or hanging wind chimes. One woman wrote, "They told me to remove my son's wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Your story gave me the courage to fight back." That one stopped me cold. I realized this wasn't just about Grandma's mural anymore. It was about freedom, the right to express yourself, to have something personal, meaningful, and human in a place that tried to make everyone the same. So I decided to do something about it. I set up a small website called Art Belongs Here. At first, it was just a blog. I wrote about the mural, the hearing, and everything I'd learned about property rights and historical preservation. But soon, others started submitting their own stories. Photos of murals, decorated mailboxes, garden gnomes, all the little details HOAs had tried to erase. Within a week, the website had thousands of visits. Within a month, local journalists were calling it the start of a creative revolution. People began organizing. Communities held paint days to beautify neighborhoods together, reclaiming their walls from bland uniformity. Artists volunteered to create public murals honoring teachers, firefighters, veterans, even pets that had touched people's lives. Suddenly, art wasn't the enemy. It was the voice of the people. But not everyone was happy about it. A few weeks after the site went viral, I got a letter in the mail. No name, just a typed note. "You've made a mockery of the HOA system. You'll regret this." I remember standing at my kitchen counter, reading that line, and feeling a chill. Instead of fear, though, something else burned inside me, resolve. I wasn't going to let anonymous threats scare me into silence. That night, I wrote another post on the site titled, "You Can't Paint Over People." It read, "For too long, HOAs have acted like color, character, and compassion are violations. They're not. They're the heart of a neighborhood. If that bothers someone, maybe they're the ones who need a new coat of paint, not us." That post got shared more than any before it. Tens of thousands of comments poured in. People wanted change. Then one morning, I received an unexpected call from a reporter at a major network. "Emily," she said, "your story's inspiring people across the country. Would you be willing to appear on national television to talk about it?" My hands trembled. I wasn't a politician or an activist. I was just a teacher's granddaughter with a paintbrush. But Grandma always said, when something's worth saying, say it proud. So I agreed. They flew me out to New York. I sat under bright studio lights, nervously gripping my coffee mug. When the cameras rolled, I told our story from the beginning, from Karen's paint rollers to the hearing and the landmark protection. The host leaned forward. So what do you want to see happen next? I took a deep breath. I want HOAs to remember that rules should protect, not control. I want every community to celebrate art instead of erasing it. And I want people to stop being afraid to stand out. The audience clapped. And just like that, the movement had a voice. Back home, things started changing fast. Local councils began reviewing HOA policies, especially around art and home individuality. Some even invited me to speak at community meetings. It was strange. The same people who once called my mural graffiti were now asking for my input on beautification projects. Even the mayor told me, "You've done more for this town's spirit than a dozen committees ever did." I couldn't help but laugh. All I did was keep a mural alive. He smiled. That's exactly the point. And then one evening, I saw a familiar figure standing near the mural, Karen. It had been months since the hearing. She looked different, quieter, humbler. When she noticed me, she hesitated, then said softly, "It's beautiful again." "Thanks," I replied cautiously. "I lost everything because of this," she continued. "My position, my reputation. But maybe I needed to." Her voice cracked. "You were right. I forgot that neighborhoods are about people, not control." For a long moment, we just stood there, both staring at Grandma Lily's smiling face on the wall. "I hope you find peace, Karen," I said finally. She nodded. "I already started painting again," she whispered, almost shyly. "My daughter and we're working on a mural at the community center." That caught me off guard. I smiled. Then maybe this was meant to happen after all. She looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled back before walking away. That night, I turned off my phone and sat on the porch. The mural glowed under the streetlight, soft and golden. The fight had started with anger, but it ended with hope, and that's the kind of victory Grandma would have loved most. Because in the end, the message wasn't about paint, or walls, or HOA rules. It was about remembering that beauty, kindness, and courage can survive anything, even beige paint. 6 months passed since the mural became a landmark, and my life had completely changed. What began as one small battle against an HOA had grown into a nationwide conversation. Reporters still called sometimes, asking for updates, but I turned most of my attention towards something else, something that felt bigger than news. My little website, Art Belongs Here, had become a full nonprofit. We had volunteers in over 30 states, each working with communities to bring art into neighborhoods that had long been stripped of personality by HOA uniformity. We helped painters, sculptors, teachers, and kids find walls, fences, or even sidewalks that could tell a story, just like Grandma's mural did for me. And people loved it. Whole streets began transforming. Once boring suburban rows now shimmered with color, murals of nurses, firefighters, local heroes, even rescue animals. Neighbors started coming out of their homes, talking again, laughing again. Something about the art had reconnected everyone. It reminded me of what my grandmother always said when she taught her art classes: you don't paint to impress. You paint to connect. But success came with challenges too. A few powerful HOAs didn't appreciate the movement. They called us troublemakers and rule breakers. Some even tried to sue communities that joined the project, claiming murals lowered property values. Funny thing though, data started proving the exact opposite. A university study found that neighborhoods embracing community art actually increased in value by an average of 12%. It turns out people liked living somewhere that felt alive, somewhere that wasn't just beige walls and silence. When that study went viral, the resistance started to fade. Even lawmakers began taking notice. I was invited to speak at a state housing hearing where a new bill was being proposed, one that would prevent HOAs from destroying or restricting community artwork without a democratic vote. Standing there, in front of rows of officials and cameras, I thought of Grandma Lily. She was the reason all of this started. The reason I picked up a paintbrush, and the reason I refused to back down when Karen came with her buckets of beige. I spoke from my heart. Art doesn't divide communities, it defines them. When people can see themselves in their surroundings, they protect it more. They take pride in it. Because it belongs to them. Afterward, one of the council members, a woman about my grandmother's age, leaned over and whispered, "You reminded me of someone I used to know, a teacher named Lily Hart." I froze. That was my grandmother. The woman smiled. "She taught my daughter how to paint. She changed her life. Thank you for carrying that forward." I left that room with tears in my eyes. A few weeks later, the bill passed, unanimously. It became known as the Lily Act. Every time I saw those two words in print, I felt a lump rise in my throat. Grandma's name wasn't just on a mural anymore, it was in law. Her lesson, her legacy, had literally reshaped the rules. The news spread fast. Communities across the country began adopting similar policies, calling them color rights. HOAs were now being encouraged, even rewarded, for supporting creative community expression. And in one of those ironic little twists life loves to throw at you, guess who signed up to help paint her neighborhood's first new mural? Karen. She even emailed me a photo of it. It was a giant sunflower, painted with her daughter. The message below said simply, "Thank you for reminding me what art really means." One Sunday morning, I went to visit Grandma's mural again. The sun was just rising, the air crisp with the smell of rain-soaked pavement. I brought my coffee and sat on the bench across the street, the one the city had added for visitors after it became a protected landmark. As I sat there, I noticed something new near the bottom corner of the mural. Someone had left a small bronze plaque. It read, "In memory of Lily Hart, who taught a town how to see beauty again." Underneath, in smaller letters, someone had added, "Her legacy lives in every color we dare to paint." I didn't know who had placed it there, but I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. It wasn't sadness, it was something else. Peace. Because I finally realized this was never just about saving a wall. It was about saving a story that lived on through every brushstroke, every neighbor who dared to be different, every kid who picked up a paintbrush without fear. Later that day, as I was locking up the community art studio, the same one where Grandma used to teach, I found an old wooden box tucked in the corner. Dusty. Forgotten. Inside was a stack of her lesson plans, and a letter addressed to me. I sat down and opened it carefully. "My sweet Emily," it began. "One day, someone will tell you that art doesn't matter. That rules matter more than stories. When that happens, promise me you'll remember this: you don't paint for approval. You paint to remind the world that it's still alive." At the bottom, she'd drawn a tiny heart, the same one she used to sign on the corner of every mural. I smiled through the tears. "Don't worry, Grandma," I whispered. "I kept my promise." Today, the mural still stands, brighter than ever. Tourists come to see it, students paint near it, and every new homeowner who moves into our town hears the story. The story of how one girl and her grandmother's painting changed everything. And sometimes when I walk by and the light hits the wall just right, I swear I can almost see her standing there, brush in hand, smiling that same knowing smile. Because even though Grandma's gone, her colors, her courage, and her spirit will always live on.